Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sounds of Awareness. I'm Paul Van Dyke. I want to start off by mentioning that this is going to be a program near the end of the Sounds of Awareness series that I've been doing for the last 20 years, since basically late summer of 1992. The reason for that is that several things have happened. My position has been eliminated due to the changing economy and outsourcing of many of the medical transcription jobs that have been available. And I'm also going back to college at age 64, taking paralegal training. So I'm really not going to have time to do this program. Well, several things I have learned about doing radio shows. One in particular is that I used to laugh when I would hear NPR, for example. There'd be this program is produced by so-and-so and directed by so-and-so, and our librarian is so-and-so. And they list about a dozen people that would be responsible for keeping some egomaniac on the radio behind the microphone. And I realized that producing a radio show, a half-hour radio show, really takes a lot of work. It takes me about 10 hours of real time to do a half-hour radio show by myself, to find the guest, get the schedule lined up, and get all that stuff together, do what we call the show prep. That takes several hours to kind of get the feel of what we're going to talk about. And then do the interview, do the editing, and put everything together in the digital format, and then get it up to out to the stations. So we've had quite an interesting history with this program, and I just kind of wanted to reminisce about that because we've got 2 more programs to do between now and December, and then that will be it. This program really is the only program dedicated solely to disability issues. Other shows will maybe have a segment about a person with a disability or news about something that affects people with disability, but that's not the whole point of their program. One of the reasons I didn't want to do this program in the beginning was that I felt that the media generally tends to treat people with disabilities as something either superhuman, despite the overwhelming handicaps or challenges or whatever. They've managed to do things that other people just couldn't do. I mean, I'm not going to mention anything about the Paralympics because I think that's a pretty good idea that shows people that folks with disabilities can do stuff. But basically, you're either superhuman, super special, or you're something to be pitied, and won't you please donate money? And so as a consequence of that, I didn't really want to do it. I first got involved in this program when I was riding the bus home from Emmanuel Hospital with my guide dog, Remington, and Kenton Herman, who was a gentleman at the time who was volunteering at KBOO, asked me if I would be interested in hosting a program. And at first I was kind of rude, and I told him no. That's the edited version of what I said for edited for radio version. But eventually he talked me into it, and we did a couple of programs live over at KBOO. And then we started supplying the shows on cassette and later CDs and now computers and MP3 files. I've had a chance to do a lot of learning doing the program. Marilyn Pittman, who is an excellent instructor, gave a seminar to us here sometime back on the right way to do radio, and even how to do show prep, and even how the correct way to use a microphone. And it's been really instructional for me working with KBOO, working for KBOO. And so it's a good volunteer position, but again, as I point out, my situation has changed, and we're on the road to new and better things. I don't want to bore you with all of that personal stuff. So anyway, we'll get into the interview. This is going to be the second part of a program that we're doing on the rights of disabled people to earn minimum wage. Should people who are less productive because of their disability have the right to earn minimum wage? And we talked a little bit about that last month on the program with the gentleman in Kelso, Washington, who runs a shop that hires folks with disabilities. We're going to talk today with Mitch Pomerantz, who's the president of the American Council of the Blind, and we're going to discuss the minimum wage issue a little bit more. By the way, I understand that a judge in a lower court in Maryland has ruled the exclusion unconstitutional. So we'll see how that works out. That may be appealed by folks who do employ people with disabilities. So here's the interview with Mitch Pomerantz, and we'll talk more later. You're listening to Sounds of Awareness from KBOO-FM in Portland. I'm Paul Van Dyke. We're talking about, should people with disabilities receive minimum wage? Should the exemption to the minimum wage law be taken away? And there is a lot of debate on both sides of the issue. And there's some misinformation out there. So we are trying to get as much information as we can so people can make informed decisions about it. I'm speaking now with Mitch, try that again, please. I'm speaking now with Mitch Pomerantz, who is the president of the ACB, the American Council of the Blind. The American Council of the Blind has, as I understand, oversight of several workshops for people who are disabled, and we're going to talk about that and explore some more of this minimum wage issue. Good morning, Mitch.
Good morning, Paul.
Good to have you on this morning.
It's good to be here. But I do need to begin with a little bit of a correction.
Okay.
The American Council of the Blind does not oversee any facilities of any kind. We are strictly a consumer advocacy organization of blind and visually impaired persons. We operate in 6 states, actually in 5 states, but 6 thrift stores. But those have nothing to do with the kind of facilities that you're referencing in terms of employing people with disabilities, whether they're paid sub-minimum wage or not. We operate thrift stores but do not oversee any kind of quote-unquote workshop facility.
Oh, okay. So that reference then, apparently I had understood that you had a number of facilities where, I guess maybe my understanding was you had a number of facilities where disabled people, particularly blind people, are employed.
No, we operate thrift stores. We may well employ some folks with disabilities. I don't know whether we do or not, frankly, but all of our workers at our thrift stores do receive at least minimum wage. So.
Okay, well, let's talk about that, if we could, about that minimum wage issue. Now, as a person who has been in business for myself during my life, and as I've been basically on both sides of the counter, it's, again, this is a personal feeling of the host here. I don't see how, if a person isn't producing something of monetary value, that you can pay them more than what they're giving you. I mean, in the real world, you turn out so many widgets an hour or something to be sold, and if the company doesn't make money off the labor, you hire somebody who does, who can. So where do we come down with this what is the reason for the sub-minimum wage in the first place? And I guess the other thing I'm trying to find out from you is here sometime back the National Federation of the Blind and other disabled groups picketed the Goodwill Industries because they allegedly get a lot of money and donations and so on, and the perception that they're trying to give is that people with disabilities who are paid less than minimum wage are being exploited. So I wonder if you could shed some light on that.
Let's try to provide a little bit of background. First of all, the exemption under the Fair Labor Standards Act, the 14C exemption, is really and was really established many years ago, and it was used to provide work experience and work activities for folks with disabilities. Over the years, the use of that certificate has really lessened significantly. For example, National Industries for the Blind, which oversees probably 100 plus facilities around the country. Everybody used to call them sheltered workshops, but that's really a misnomer, and I think an inappropriate description of what these facilities are now. Their National Board of Directors passed a policy at least 3 years ago that directs all NIB facilities to pay their blind employees at least the minimum wage. There are other facilities around the country that employ persons who are blind but have other disabilities. And some of those folks are under the 14C certificate. There may even be a score or 24 persons whose only disability is blindness who are receiving less than the minimum wage. And I advised someone in that situation recently that they ought to file a complaint with the Department of Labor, because that's illegal. If they are able to work competitively, if their only disability is blindness, then absolutely they should receive the minimum wage. But the persons who are receiving sub-minimum wage today, assuming that they're receiving it legitimately, are persons who have blindness is not their primary disability. It is one of two or more significant disabilities, and they are really not working per se. They are performing what we used to call, back in the 70s and earlier, work activity or work therapy. So this is an issue, I think, frankly, that has been used. The organization NFB uses the word exploit. Well, they can do what they choose, but I think the exploitation is really by them taking an issue that is a very serious hot-button issue to many other disability groups around the country, particularly which have a significant number of their members who are not receiving the minimum wage, and they're using this issue to their advantage. And that's they don't tell us how to run our business, and we don't tell them how to run theirs. But it is, I think, not a major issue for blind and visually impaired persons. Let me hasten to add that when earlier this year a letter was drafted by a disability coalition that went to Senator Tom Harkin, who is the chair of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. We were asked would we sign the letter. And we, at that time, decided, myself, our Director of Governmental Affairs, and our Executive Director, had a couple of conversations, and we decided that, we would sign on to the letter because we certainly empathized with those other disability groups, but we also stipulated to this coalition that we had some concerns. We wanted to see in whatever legislation eventually came out of this the hearings that the Help Committee and Senator Harkins had, we wanted to see some safeguards, because what could very easily happen is if facilities that employed, and again I use that term in quotes, if there were folks at facilities receiving sub-minimum wage, maybe receiving some benefits as well, we were very concerned that some of these facilities would simply turn around and shut down the program and send these people back home to, perhaps less fulfilling lives than they're experiencing now. So we did sign on to the letter, but I should also mention that bill this year is going nowhere. It never got out of committee, and I don't see, using my political crystal ball, I don't see this legislation going anywhere, certainly the next session of Congress. There just isn't enough support. That's not to say it isn't an important issue for some people, but it hasn't, as they say on Capitol Hill, it doesn't have legs. But for our people, for blind and visually impaired people, this affects very few, if any, of our constituents, and very, very few blind and visually impaired people around the country, probably 24 or less.
Mitch Pomerantz is the president of the American Council of the Blind, and we are talking about work-related stuff. Should people get paid minimum wage or less for the work that they produce or sometimes do not produce? And there's a big hot-button issue right now. Back in August, last weekend in August, the National Federation of the Blind, along with other groups, picketed the stores around the country, the Goodwill Industries stores, claiming that their workers were being exploited and so on, and that the CEO of Goodwill was making something like $500,000 a year, and wasn't that terrible? They should be paying their poor workers. Now, Mitch, you mentioned to me that, talking about the Goodwill thing for just a minute, which is not obviously part of ACB, but you pointed out to me that, tell me a little bit about the CEO of Goodwill.
Well, the CEO of Goodwill Industries is a gentleman named Jim Gibbons, and he is blind. And I have no idea what he earns. But I came from the government sector where you had to be a lot higher in the food chain to earn six figures. I never earned six figures in 34 years in government, and I was in some pretty influential positions, but I never earned six figures. I have no idea what salary Mr. Gibbons earned, but running any kind of major business operation is a pretty complex job, and I don't know any CEOs earning less than six figures. So what he earns is his and his board of directors' business. And I guess that's all I'll say on the matter.
Okay, are you, just kind of an aside here, it has really nothing to do with this per se, but, we hear about bank executives, foreclosing on mortgages and foreclosing on people's houses when they can't pay their mortgage, and yet the CEOs make hand over fist money. And so this isn't a situation like that particularly. Just because the CEO makes a lot of money doesn't mean that they're exploiting people to do it, I would assume.
No, if you believe that anybody, regardless of how productive they are, should earn a minimum wage, and by the way, we have members in our organization who believe that. I know some of them. I know one gentleman in Washington State who says so very avidly. But if you believe that, regardless of how productive or unproductive for whatever reason you still should be making a minimum wage, then you may well believe that these people are being exploited. If you believe that these programs serve a function, even if it's a social function, socialization, to provide some respite care for the folks at home, then it's not necessarily exploitation. There are, there's SSI, which certainly doesn't pay a lot in benefits, but there are programs out there. But I suppose, like everything else this day and age in this country, it all boils down to politics and ideology. I think these programs serve a valuable purpose. You can argue that maybe they shouldn't be called employees, or this shouldn't be called employment, but we're living in a time when we're very cognizant of people's feelings and people's rights and political correctness. So even these programs are now considered employment. So it depends, I suppose, on your perspective. I believe that if someone is being productive, and there are ways to measure productivity. I used to work in human resources for a number of years, so I have a pretty fair idea of how you measure productivity. If someone is being productive, is doing handling X number of phone calls an hour, or putting together X number of widgets per hour, or typing, doing medical transcribing, or whatever it is, if they are being competitive, they ought to be paid a minimum wage. But if that's not the primary reason for them being at that facility, then that's another matter entirely.
Would you base your feelings on this on whether or not the employer was getting paid for significantly for the work that was turned out? For instance, if you're making, let's say you're putting together mess kits for the military or something, and you're working along there at your $10 an hour or whatever, and the military is paying. I'm throwing figures out here just as examples. I don't know if this is right or not, but let's say they're paying, 4 times that for these things.
It doesn't really work that way, Paul, because you have to build in other costs. What are the other costs? Well, you have to build in some percentage of time that the supervisor supervises. You have to build in the cost of materials. You have to build in some administrative costs. So, as a former government employee who is really sensitive to the kind of criticism that we hear a lot about in terms of how much somebody earns or how much something costs because it's from the government. You can't simply look at the cost of one employee and their hourly wage. You have to also figure in the other folks who supervise, who handle administration, the electricity in the facility. All of those get figured into the cost of those workers. So, it's not a simple equation. It's real easy to try to make this a simple issue, sort of news by soundbite. It doesn't work that way. Life isn't that simple. Never has been, never will be. So there are other factors that go into figuring out. Using your example, the government pays $50 a head for this worker, but this worker is only making $10 an hour. Well, you can't simply say, $30 of that is going to the CEO. That's not business reality.
Right, and I think that a lot of people have that perception, though. That's kind of why I framed it the way I did.
I think you're right. I think that's absolutely right.
And I have worked, believe me, I was a piano tuner for almost 15 years, and every time I got $35 or $40 for a piano that I tuned. Boy, I thought, man, I'm in seventh heaven now. But I realized that my driver waiting for me, I had to pay him, and I had to pay for my phone bill, and I had to pay for any advertising that I did. I was paying $500 a month to a radio station in Vancouver at the time for some advertising. And my bookkeeper said, Paul, you are now you are really in the big money here because you're making minus 25 cents an hour.
Yes.
So
yes.
That's why I went into medical transcription. Now that's going down the tubes because they're outsourcing that. So that's why I'm going back to school for my third career.
Yeah, exactly.
But you have to. You have to. The reality isn't always sweet dreams.
Anybody who runs a business, and I do private consulting now in the ADA field. But anybody who runs a business knows that it isn't just profit. There are other expenses involved, and you have to figure those in. And that's why there's a difference between gross and net.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Mitch, good grief, we've come up to the end of our clock here. And I really appreciate the fact that you came on with us. Mitch Pomerantz, who is president of the American Council of the Blind, an excellent organization, I might add. And we've been talking about basically the work ethic and who gets paid minimum wage and who doesn't because of a lot of recent talk in the news about disabled workers allegedly being exploited by big outfits like Goodwill Industries and so on, who were picketed not long ago by a number of disabled groups. But Mitch, I want to thank you for coming on this morning with us on Sounds of Awareness.
You're very welcome, Paul. It's been a pleasure to be with you.
This has been Sounds of Awareness. For more information about our program and guests, please visit our screen reader-friendly website, publicradio113.weebly.com, or kboo.fm/Sounds of Awareness. This program is independently produced for KBOO-FM by Paul and April Van Dyke. Thank you for listening, everyone.